Um, my name's Michael Klaproth. I'm an associate director with Enterprise Community Partners here in our Southern California market. And we are so excited to welcome you all to the final session in our Resilient Housing LA webinar series. And this is a partnership again between Enterprise and the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. So today's session, we will focus on disaster mitigation and recovery. Our first session 2 weeks ago, which you can find the recording and slides for, was focused on sustainable housing and building decarbonization. But today we will focus really on disasters and also kind of the use the LA wildfires as really a crux for this conversation. So let's go to the next slide. Here's our agenda for the day. We'll start with some context setting, framing the challenge that our communities here in Southern California are facing in the aftermath of the LA wildfires. From there, we'll discuss the shifting federal policy landscape as it relates to resources and programs for disaster recovery and climate resilience. We'll then turn it over to our partners at LADWP to highlight their Home LA program. Our friends at HCD and CalHFA will then take it from there to share some key state resources for rebuilding, and we'll tie it all together with actionable strategies for disaster mitigation and recovery led by USGBC California and Neighborhood Partnership Housing Services. Next slide. Great. So before we jump in, I wanted to just give a special thanks to our sponsor and co-host, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Really extremely grateful for their partnership on this Resilient Housing LA series. Great. Okay, so we're really grateful to have an amazing lineup of speakers joining us today to share their expertise. From Enterprise's Building Resilient Futures team, we have Krista Egger joining us. From LEDWP, we have Anayat Mia. From the California Department of Housing and Community Development, we're grateful to have Clay Kirchhoff, Chris Saar from the California Housing Finance Agencies also joining us, and Ben Stapleton from USGBC California, and Jesse Ibarra from the Neighborhood Partnership Housing Services round out our all-star speaker lineup here. I also wanted to just quickly recognize my Enterprise SoCal colleagues, Sydney and Brian, who will be helping out with some presentations and also with some back of Zoom support. And so just some quick housekeeping before we jump in and before I turn it over to Sydney. Please use the Q&A function to ask your questions. As they come up during the presentation, we'll depending on how we're doing with time, we'll hope to pause at the end of each section to address your questions. And then time permitting, we'll also have some dedicated Q&A section at the end as well. But just please use that Q&A function to ask your questions. We'll be monitoring that Q&A chat box. So please feel free to drop your questions as we go along. And I will now turn it over to my colleague Sydney.
Great. So before we pass it on to our guest speakers today, we just wanted to quickly set the scene for what we're talking about today and why it's so important to talk about it. The 2025 Los Angeles wildfires was one of the worst climate disasters in the history of Los Angeles. As we know, Altadena and the Pacific Palisades saw the worst of the destruction, with a combined total of over 16,000 structures destroyed and 37,000 acres burned. Climate change is fueling longer, more intense wildfire seasons, with rising temperatures, prolonged droughts, and high winds creating the ideal conditions for destruction. Renters and low-income homeowners face a greater risk of displacement, and with each disaster, insurance costs rise with less options available as insurers withdraw from fire-prone areas. If we do not act now to curb emissions and invest in resilience, our communities, and particularly low-income and disadvantaged communities, will only suffer as climate-related disasters grow in severity and frequency. Next slide, please. So zooming in on the state of rental housing in Altadena following the wildfires, this slide shows some findings from UCLA's Latino Policy and Politics Institute. Before the fire, Altadena's rental housing stock was made up primarily of old, smaller scale properties. Many of these properties offered family-sized units that housed long-term tenants. However, since the wildfires, many tenants have faced displacement and relocation, not knowing whether they'll be able to return. Among Altadena's renter population, 7 in 10 rental units were located within the fire perimeter, and about 927 units were on properties that sustained severe structural damage. Secondly, rental recovery has largely stalled. 74% of rental units in the fire perimeter remain on properties with no public record of rebuilding, sale, or market relisting 1 year later. And only 18% of rental units are on properties that have filed rebuilding permits. Third, rent stabilized and naturally affordable units were disproportionately affected, which raises concerns about permanent loss of affordability. Altadena had at least 792 rent stabilized units prior to the fire, representing more than 1/3 of its rental market. 2/3 of those units were located within the fire perimeter, and 39% were on properties with severe structural damage. Lastly, affordable family size units face an uncertain future. Rent stabilized 2-bedroom units rented for $600 less per month than non rent stabilized or market rate units, and 3-bedroom units rented for about $700 less. Many of the naturally affordable non rent stabilized units destroyed by the fire also rented for 17% below the average of non rent stabilized units that were not destroyed by the fire. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. And now I will pass it over to our colleague, Krista Egger, who leads Enterprise's national sustainability efforts to talk about the federal landscape for disaster mitigation and recovery.
Great. Thank you so much, Sydney and Michael, and all of the amazing leaders on the line today. Today, for the next few minutes, I'll share with you a snapshot of the federal landscape for disaster mitigation and recovery in the context of California. So we can go to the next slide, and I'll share with you here an overview of what my next few minutes will be about. I'll start by sharing implications of the passage last summer of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBBA. I'll touch on California's pending disaster supplemental request from the federal government. I'll share some promising bipartisan actions on housing and disaster recovery at the federal level. And then I'll close by highlighting a few items for you all to watch in the days and weeks after today's session regarding federal action that could bring funds and promising policy modifications to California. So let's start by touching on IRA rollbacks, like what happened, and how does that affect your developments today? So we can go to the next slide, and I'll frame this section on the IRA rollbacks on recent federal changes, energy and resilience funding updates, and some potential bright spots for future resilience funding. So the IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act, originally provided long-term certainty for clean energy tax credits, rebates, and financing for multifamily affordable housing. Certain programs authorized by the IRA still exist, but at the same time, OBBBA and recent executive actions have rolled back or altered many of those incentives that were passed a few years ago. So, what this means for multifamily and single family affordable housing developers is that you really need to act quickly to be able to access any of these IRA authorized funding programs. So, the impacts of the changes include tighter deadlines, stricter documentation, and loss of certain funding sources. So let's look at 5 of the most common tax credits and programs for multifamily housing developers that you can see here on the screen. First, there's the 45L tax credit for new energy efficient homes. This is a federal tax credit for builders of energy efficient homes. And given the changes last fall, to qualify for this credit, homes must be built and sold or leased and Energy Star certified by July of this year to be able to access that tax credit. The next one, the 179D deduction, is kind of the parallel of 45L, but for commercial buildings. This is a federal tax credit deduction for owners or designers of energy efficient commercial buildings. And similarly to 45L, to access this credit now, projects must begin construction by July of this year. For 48E, the investment tax credit, really for solar and wind, this is another federal tax credit to be eligible to access this one, projects must begin construction by July 4 of this year and be placed in service by the end of next year. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the federal one at least, this was an EPA administered fund for grants and loans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, prioritizing clean energy projects and low income communities. Funding for this is largely tied up in litigation, which we expect to last for another year. So availability is uncertain for at least another year. And then finally, the Solar for All program was another EPA program. This one was designed to support rooftop solar for low income households and multifamily properties. That program has been terminated. So if that was a part of a project budget, alternative financing is needed. So overall, the takeaway from this section is that OBBBA rollbacks and Solar for All termination really have reshaped the funding landscape very quickly in this space. Small to mid-scale rooftop solar projects retain some flexibility, which is fantastic, but timing and documentation are really critical. Developers really need to pivot to new financing models and look at state and local programs, utility partnerships, and stacking solar with other tax credits for housing like LIHTC. So the takeaway here is engage early with your state energy office, your utility, to explore available programs and incentives to make up for gaps that you may have been counting on through some of these federal programs. But let's move on and turn to the federal disaster supplemental funding for Los Angeles wildfires. Um, while LA wildfire recovery continues, as you all know so well, through local, state, and federal and nonprofit support, the state is still waiting for a federal disaster supplemental, which is a disaster relief funding package passed by Congress to support recovery from natural disasters. This disaster supplemental includes a CDBG-DR allocation to support long-term housing needs post-disaster. CDBG-DR stands for Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery. It's a federal program administered by HUD that provides long-term recovery funding for housing, for infrastructure, for economic revitalization after a major disaster declaration. So it's a complicated program, but it really is the best and in some cases the only federal long-term disaster recovery program for housing. So CDBGR grants are highly structured and they are only released after Congress appropriates a supplemental disaster funding, and then HUD has allocated it to the impacted states. So the process for a CDBG-DR takes many months, often 12 to 24 plus months after a disaster event, because Congress first has to pass the supplemental appropriations, then HUD allocates the funds by disaster year, requires impacted states to submit action plans, and the states and local governments have to define their unmet recovery needs and eligible programs in those plans. So it's a long, just administrative process before anyone sees impact or sees those recovery funds. And in particular for the Los Angeles wildfires, the White House has not advanced any recovery proposals since California's first formal request for it in February of last year. So we all know that these funds are desperately needed. But let's go on to the next slide, and I'll bring y'all back up a little bit and share some bright spots with bipartisan interest at the federal level in housing and disaster recovery. So, in recent months, the Senate and the House have introduced and individually passed two landmark pieces of legislation, the Road to Housing Act and the Housing for the 21st Century Act. Together, these two bills represent the most comprehensive efforts of our time to address housing affordability and supply, and they're strong because of their multi-pronged approach. Both of these bills recognize that there's no single solution to our housing challenges, and they both really focus on a core driver of the affordability crisis being the urgent need to increase supply. So, beyond paving the way to build new homes, these pieces of legislation make vital investments in preserving existing stock, strengthening federal programs that millions of families rely on, and they advance affordability and opportunity for both homeowners and renters. So, of particular importance to this conversation that we're having today is that the Senate's road bill includes permanent authorization of CDBG-DR. This means it would permanently authorize HUD's Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program, and it would eliminate that inefficient process that I described to you a few minutes ago that requires the ad hoc congressional funding approval after disasters occur. So with permanent authorization, HUD would always have the legal authority to run CDBG-DR, and it wouldn't have to rely on a one-off law after each disaster. So with a reserve fund, HUD could immediately use money that Congress may have already put into the fund or recaptured from past disasters. So recovery can start while Congress debates additional disaster-specific funding. But Congress would still control the tap of money. So we've been really pleased and hopeful to see this level of bipartisan support for housing legislation, and we're optimistic it will get over the finish line. And we're advocating really hard to see that the CDBG-DR permanent authorization is included in any final housing package. So let's go on to the next slide. The other bit of bipartisan good news is the FEMA Act. So Enterprise supports the FEMA Act. This would ensure that disaster survivors can fully recover while remaining in their homes and in their communities. So if this act passes, the FEMA Act of 2025, it would institute multiple reforms to agency programs that will ensure that disaster survivors, whether they're renters or homeowners or experiencing homelessness, can access the assistance they need to fully recover. Some specific reforms included in the bill include restoring FEMA as an independent agency, reporting directly to the president as a cabinet level agency, making it easier for individuals without a fixed address, like individuals experiencing homelessness, to access post disaster housing assistance, and many, many more elements of this bill. So we're really advocating for this bill to remove the barriers of being able to access funding in the communities that we serve. So I'll wrap up with this next slide and just close out by reiterating that I've shared a little bit about the implications of OBBBA and recent executive actions on housing and climate investments. I've shared about the status of the federal disaster supplemental in regards to the LA wildfires. And then I've shared a snapshot of bipartisan interest at the federal level in housing and disaster recovery. So I'll close by highlighting a few aspects for y'all to watch moving forward, and they're listed on the slide here. So keep an eye out for whether litigation to restore federal funding for clean energy and resilience programs comes to pass, and engage with your state energy office and utilities to understand available incentives in the meantime. Watch for movement on the bipartisan housing package, specifically the road bill, and whether it includes the Reforming Disaster Recovery Act, which would permanently authorize CDBG-DR. Watch to see if the FEMA Act passes, and keep an eye on appropriations for this year and whether climate resilience and disaster recovery programs will be adequately funded there. So that's a lot. Some good news, some bad news, and some wait to see news, but hoping that this snapshot and transparency helps you with your planning. And I'll turn it back to the team.
Thank you so much, Krista. No questions in the chat, which I chalk up to just such a thorough presentation. But if they roll in, we will share those with you, Krista, to address them. But thank you so much for joining and sharing all that really helpful information.
Thank you.
We will turn it over now to NA at Mia from the LADWP.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here and joining us today. My name is Anayat Mia, and I serve as a manager in LADWP's Distributed Energy Solutions division. And within our division, I oversee a wide range of customer programs spanning commercial, industrial, institutional, single-family, multifamily, and field support sectors. And today, I will be focusing on our Home LA program. Now, this program was launched in direct response to the devastating 2025 wildfires that impacted so many in our community. We know that these homes will be rebuilt, but Home LA allows them to be rebuilt cleaner, healthier, and more resilient than before. Next slide, please. So in July 2025, LADWP launched Home LA, which stands for the High Performance Optimized Modern Electrification for Los Angeles. Home LA provides financial incentives for residential and low-rise multifamily new construction projects that commit to rebuilding all electric. At this time, participation is focused on property owners rebuilding homes that were substantially damaged or destroyed by the January 2025 wildfires, and that includes the Palisades, Hearst, Kenneth, Archer, and Sunset wildfires. This is intentional. We are rebuilding after a disaster. We have a choice when we rebuild. Do we rebuild what was, or do we rebuild better? And Home LA ensures that we rebuild better. As additional funding becomes available, we do plan to expand participation more broadly throughout the city of Los Angeles in the coming years. Next slide. So Home LA focuses on 4 core end use categories, the systems that drive the majority of residential energy use. We've got space heating and cooling, which includes both ducted and ductless heat pump HVAC systems. We've got water heating, which includes heat pump water heaters. We've got cooking, which includes induction cooktops, ranges, and wall ovens, and clothes dryers, which include heat pump dryers. And when a project electrifies in all 4 categories and end uses, then it becomes eligible for additional bonus incentives, which include whole home batteries and ultra low global warming potential heat pump water heaters. So we understand that going electric is a major lifestyle change. So we offer our customers 2 different pathways to participate in the program. Next slide. So for homeowners ready to fully electrify, we offer the whole home pathway. To qualify, all 4 end use categories must be all electric, and this path is designed for comprehensive high performance rebuilds. Because this is a new construction program, we require permits and certificate of occupancy, ensuring code compliance and long-term performance. Whole home participants are automatically eligible for the bonus measures, and this pathway rewards full commitment to electrification. Next slide. So the whole home incentives are calculated per dwelling unit and vary based on housing type. So for example, a low-rise multifamily project, and low-rise is defined as 3 stories and less. So if there's a low-rise project, let's say for 3 units, then that's $5,000 per unit. That's $15,000 in this scenario. And this per unit structure ensures equity across housing forms for single family, modular, ADUs, manufactured, and multifamily homes. So our goal is to make all electric construction financially viable across housing types. Next, please. So we understand not every homeowner will want to electrify all at once. So that's why we created the Express pathway. Express allows customers to choose which measures they electrify, which is a flexible a la carte approach. So if they electrify HVAC only, they receive that incentive. If they electrify HVAC and cooking, they receive both incentives. And Express, what's important is for Express participant who ultimately electrify in all 4 categories, then they do, again, qualify for the bonus measures as well. Now you may be wondering why why would someone go this express route if they're going to incentivize all four categories anyway and upgrade. So the next slide will answer that. So when we talk about under the express pathway, incentives are provided on a per unit or per ton basis. So this structure can result in higher total incentives for customers installing multiple units for of qualifying equipment. So that initial $10,000, that's the baseline, but going this route based on your system size and how big the property is and how many units you're installing, you can potentially achieve higher incentives going this route. And once a customer applies, we will calculate both options for that customer, and then the customer can choose the path they would like to take. You'll notice here that the incentives are in ranges for heat pump HVAC system, for heat pump water heaters, and clothes dryers. The incentive amounts varies based on the efficiency level of each product, and the higher the efficiency, the higher the incentive. Electric resistance equipment is not eligible because electrification must also be efficient. So induction is the preferred method. And so this ensures that we're advancing both decarbonization, but also long-term affordability for our customers. Next slide, please. So the bonus measures that we've talked about, these are available again only to customers that upgrade in all four end uses. And we've designed that because we understand resiliency and decarbonization, they work best as a system. So we want to encourage full system upgrades. Next slide, please. So right here, you can see the incentive amounts. So for whole home battery incentives, we got $5,000. And these batteries enhance outage preparedness and grid stability. And for the ultra-low GWP heat pump water heaters, we offer $3,000. And this reduces refrigerant-related emissions. And this is an often overlooked climate contributor. So we're looking to make an impact there. And these incentives ensure that electrification is not just about fuel switching, but also about future-proofing your home. Next slide. So the application process, we've got 5 structured steps. The customer first submits their application to LADWP with all required documentation. And then a program manager is assigned the project and will review the application package for completeness, ensuring that the proposed equipment meets all program requirements. After that, the program manager will notify the customer that or the contractor that the installation may proceed. After installation is complete, the customer or the contractor notifies LADWP that installation is done, and that's when we do a post verification of the equipment. So the program manager or a field specialist may contact and conduct an on-site verification to confirm that all proposed equipment has been installed as approved. And then after that, we process the incentive check and customers receive that payment. So while this is the typical process, sometimes customers may have already purchased their equipment before applying. And in order to be flexible, we will allow customers to apply for the program, provided that the equipment was purchased after the January 2025 wildfires, and the application is submitted within a 4-year period from the date of purchase of the equipment, and of course that the property is located in the wildfire affected area. Next slide. So this is our Home LA webpage. This website is a central hub for program information, eligibility requirements, and downloadable application material. And that's ladwp.com/HomeLA. Next slide. Applications may be submitted electronically or by mail. We have designed the process to be accessible both to homeowners and to our customers and contractors alike. So by allowing multiple ways to apply for Home LA, we hope we start getting traction in the program. Next slide. Home LA can also be layered with other funding sources, such as the California Electric Homes program known as Cal EHP. So when programs align, customers can significantly reduce upfront cost, and layering requires coordination, but when structured properly, it can strengthen affordability and accelerates electrification. So we included some information if folks are interested in Cal EHP, their website, phone number, email are provided here for your convenience. And then next slide, please. Programs like Home LA, they don't just succeed because we have incentives, but they succeed because we have communities and those communities hear about them and they trust our program. So we have hosted various workshops, we've participated in various events and engaged directly with wildfire affected residents. LADWP remains actively engaged with these communities and various community organizations, and additional workshops are continually being scheduled. And you can see that on our website, ladwp.com/HomeLA for upcoming webinars and presentations. Next slide. And to further support wildfire impacted residents, LADWP opened the Unified Utilities Rebuild Operation Center, known as the UROC, back in March of 2025. Customers can directly access services to help them rebuild, turn on and off water service, and receive answers to billing questions. This is in-person support for wildfire-affected customers, and it demonstrates that LADWP continues to be visible, responsive, and accessible, especially after a disaster. Next slide. So LADWP offers, in addition to the single-family program I just talked about, Home LA, we also offer this for commercial, new construction, and high-rise multifamily, and that's defined as 4 stories and above. So that's through our Zero by Design program. So together, Home LA and Zero by Design, we are creating a scalable electrification pathway across residential and commercial sectors. And if you have any questions about either program, please feel free to reach out to us through either the email or the hotline. And I'm happy to be able to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, I can hand it back to Michael.
Thank you, Anayet. Great. So just want to remind folks to please drop your questions in the chat as they come up. Now that we've heard about some of the local resources here in Southern California for disaster recovery, I want to bring in Clay Kirchhoff from the California Department of Housing and Community Development to kick us off with some key state resources for rebuilding and recovery. Clay?
Hi, thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. I'm Clay Kirchhoff. I'm a disaster recovery and response and recovery branch chief at the California Department of Housing and Community Development. We, do disaster response and administer long-term recovery grants in response to major disasters. In the past decade, California has, unfortunately experienced major presidentially declared major disasters in 2017, 2018, 2020, 2021, 2023, 2024, and 2025. So, with that, we have kind of increased experience on how to, leverage different long-term recovery resources, and lessons learned how to leverage policies as well. So with that, I have a few different programs and policies that I want to provide an overview for you all today. So next. The first one I want to talk about is the Community Development Block Grant for Disaster Recovery. I know Krista mentioned this in her presentation and its kind of current status in DC, but it is a flexible supplemental appropriation made for presidentially declared major disasters, and it can be used for a variety of long-term recovery needs, including housing, infrastructure, economic development, and there is a 15% set aside for hazard mitigation, forward-looking hazard mitigation that does not need to have a tie back to the qualifying disaster event. Across CDBG-DR activities, so across a grant that is made to a jurisdiction, 70% of that award does need to go to benefit low moderate income people. So whether that's supporting low moderate renters, homeowner recovery, infrastructure that supports low moderate income, census tracts, whether it's supporting businesses and workers that are LMI, or hardening homes or doing infrastructure improvements that support LMI communities. That is one of the that's one of the heartbeats of this program, and it really shapes the types of programs that do get designed and implemented with these funds. Next. I use the term leverage a lot when talking about CDBG-DR, because it is not the allocation, the appropriation is never enough to make everyone whole. It is oftentimes a down payment in long-term recovery, and at its best, it can catalyze other transformative investments. And in order to do that effectively, one has to think about the whole disaster life cycle, and all of the different tools and programs and funding resources that are available along the way, and understand how CDBG-DR could be used in concert with those resources, whether they be hazard mitigation assistance grants, CAL fire prevention grants, whether they be SBA loans and insurance proceeds, or utility liability payouts. And how are they for future long-term recovery? How are they engaging with local activities to ensure that those investments stay safe? Next slide. So what are some of the different projects and funding sources that we use for this? CDBG-DR in California has been used alongside other resources like low-income housing tax credits and tax-exempt bonds, other federal housing grants and state housing grants, as well as local funds and land trusts. These are helpful for rebuilding affordable, deed-restricted, multifamily rental housing, but also helping rebuild single-family housing for low, moderate income households who, maybe the project wouldn't work out if they weren't tied with some other funding source. Important in CDBG-DR though is avoiding duplication of benefits. So it is always important to track what other funding sources are being used to support a homeowner or a project. For infrastructure projects, CDBG-DR is often tied with FEMA PA or hazard mitigation assistance. DR can be used as that local match requirement for FEMA funds, but we've also seen it used alongside Federal Highway Administration programs, for road rebuilding after floods or wildfires. Also for sewer and flood control projects, the State Water Board, Department of Water Resources have been partners, in the past. Additionally, there's a holistic. There has to be a holistic, vision to recovery, where we're aligning investments with resilience and thinking about how are these communities going to be successful and resilient in the long term. And so how are we timing our CDBG-DR investments with utility and infrastructure investments, making sure that we're not digging up the same road twice and increasing program costs and adding delays. And how are we coordinating investments in hazard mitigation so that we're not just doing one-off home hardening and vegetation management here and there, but rather focusing on a whole community and really realizing the benefits of community resilience. So that's I could talk about CDBG-DR for much longer, but I just wanted to kind of impress the role that it has, and how it's been used in California, and think about how it can be leveraged to maximize its impact. But I want to move on to some important state grants that have been made available in response to the LA wildfires. Next. So as part of a state appropriation, there was a multifamily supernova allocation for LA wildfire recovery. The MFSN is, multiple programs that have been streamlined into one application. So next slide shows the kind of funding award and history. Next slide. So about $101 million were appropriated for LA wildfire recovery, and the awards were announced in January of 2026 for 10 projects that that will create 793 deed restricted affordable units. Next. So 4 of these 10 projects are within 5 miles of Eaton Palisades. I mean, as part of, multifamily recovery, it's often about the regional rental housing market. So, we want to be able to, invest in projects that can be rebuilt as quickly as possible. So there was, there is a, prioritization in this program, for projects that can get to construction as quickly as possible. All of the projects had local support from local housing authorities. There is occupancy preference for households displaced by the wildfires, and all construction closes in 2026. On the next slide, you can see where they're situated across, LA County. So a lot of, are in CDBGGR. Our investments, kind of work in a similar way where, we want to award funds for, deed restricted affordable projects. Ideally they can be, close to the neighborhoods where the housing losses in the qualified disaster event occurred. But sometimes they are, just going to be in, the same county or, maybe sometimes the same zip code. So for more information on the Multifamily Supernova Award for LA, there is, the whole webpage on it, with, the notice of funding availability, the policies and procedures, and more information on the projects. So just be mindful of time. Could we move forward 2 slides? So to wrap things up, I wanted to mention, land use tools. HCD does, a lot of work on land use through our housing element reviews and implementation of state law. And land use is really important for recovery because it's about not getting in the way of helping people rebuild and encouraging different types of housing on different types of land, and increasing the stock of the housing in the region in a faster kind of way. So I have it broken down into 2 different types. On the next slide, first is a series of executive orders that the governor issued. Some key land use elements were suspension of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and some Coastal Act permits for projects that repair, replace homes lost in the wildfires. Also applies to ADUs. And it also allows fire impacted property owners to build and live in an ADU before they rebuild their primary unit. A lot of folks may be uninsured or underinsured, and ADU is what is financially feasible right now before rebuilding the full unit. So this is a lesson learned from past disasters, giving people these intermediate options in order to get back onto their property and help accelerate recovery. Finally, key state land use laws that are here, blue sky days, and also have an important role, are helpful in disaster recovery. We would be in a much more difficult position if all of these important state, housing and land use laws were not in place, whether it be allowing ADUs on single family lots, by right provisions in housing element law, and streamlined ministerial approval for affordable units near transit, Surplus Land Act. All of these are serve a distinct purpose, but added up represent a really important toolbox, and that should be considered as part of the housing recovery process in Los Angeles. So that's what I have and wanted to share with y'all today. And happy to direct folks to any happy to answer any questions. But yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Clay. And we'll bring in Chris Sarr now from the California Housing Finance Agency Authority. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, I'm not seeing my slides here. Okay, cool. Thanks for having me. Really glad to be here to get the word out about the CalAssist Mortgage Fund. You can go on to the next slide. My name is Chris Sarr, and I'm an information officer at the California Housing Finance Agency, or CalHFA, which is administering the CalAssist Mortgage Fund. Just very fast, CalHFA is the state's affordable housing lender. We have down payment assistance programs and affordable housing financing, just generally, but we have also run several mortgage relief programs on behalf of the state. Previously, we administered the COVID-related mortgage relief program that you guys might have heard of. So next slide, please. Yes. CalHFA launched the CalAssist Mortgage Fund in June of 2025 to provide mortgage assistance related to the Eaton Palisades fires, as well as to other recent California disasters. The program has made $105 million available in grants to homeowners whose homes were destroyed or severely damaged due to one of those recent disasters. And CalAssist Mortgage Fund relief grants are paid directly to the homeowner's mortgage servicer to ensure the funds are used for mortgage assistance. And the program does not have a set end date. It will continue as long as funds for the grant awards are still available. Next slide, please. All right, the next couple of slides, we'll go over some of the eligibility guidelines. You can see here that the grants are for an applicant's primary residence, and that can be single-family homes, condos, duplexes, and manufactured homes are eligible as long as they are permanently affixed to real property and taxed as real estate. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned before, the disaster qualification is that the home has to be destroyed or severely damaged to the point where it has been deemed uninhabitable. Clay mentioned the ADUs on the property earlier, so folks can still be living on the property, but the home has to have been destroyed or severely damaged. And then that damage has to have occurred from a disaster that received a state of emergency proclamation from the governor or a federal major disaster declaration between January 1st, 2023 and January 8th, 2025. Next slide, please. And in terms of eligibility related to the home, it must have a mortgage with a mortgage servicer that is participating in the program, and the total mortgage amount must be below the 2025 conforming loan limit. So for Los Angeles County, that's $1.2 million. Next slide, please. The program has been open for about 7 months, maybe 8 months now, and so far we've used almost $7 million and provided awards to just over 800 households. And you can see 80% of those homes were damaged or destroyed in the Eaton fire, 16% in the Palisades fire, and just 4 from those other disasters around the state. Next slide, please. So we've been spending time listening to folks in the community and our government partners in Los Angeles, probably people on this call, to find out kind of what barriers they've been facing. And also we've been analyzing program data and external data. And so based on all that, the program announced earlier this month that it was making some pretty significant updates to give more homeowners access and give more assistance. So first and foremost, we've expanded the grants to cover 1 full year of mortgage payments for each qualifying homeowner. Previously, the program was paying off 3 months of mortgage payments. And this update goes for, of course, everyone going forward, and also each of the 800 households that were already awarded can come back for grants that will cover the 9 more months to reach the full 12 months. And then we've also increased our income limits. It's up to $281,000 per household in LA County. And that's the combined income for everyone listed on the mortgage. Next slide. This is probably the biggest the biggest slide is we want to just keep getting the word out. So if anybody on the call is interested in collaborating on outreach or want to coordinate a webinar for homeowners or for your own organization, we're really happy to make that happen. Our goal is to reach every homeowner that has lost a home. So please, yeah, get in touch with us. And then one more slide I have is just for applicants or potential applicants, we do have a call center that's available Monday through Friday during business hours. And I've heard it's very quick and easy to get a live person on the phone. And for folks that need a different kind of assistance or need more extensive analysis of their situation, we're working with HUD certified housing counselors and legal assistance organizations for those folks and connecting them when that's necessary. And that is it for me.
Great. Thank you, Chris. All right. We will now turn it over to Ben Stapleton from USGBC California to share about the California Wildfire Rebuilding Guide. Ben, take it away.
Sure. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Ben Stapleton. I'm the CEO here at the U.S. Green Building Council of California. Very quickly on us, we are an independent nonprofit. I like to say kind of for California, by California. We work in partnership with the National U.S. Green Building Council that runs the LEED credential and certification many of you may know and love, but our work is inherently very different, and our mission is really to transform California into a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable place for all. We do that primarily through action, and that is leading, educating, connecting, and advocating. We actually have 10 regions across the state with leadership in place and engaged communities. And I'm really proud of the model that we're attempting to build here to create positive change in communities by building real things in real places. Over the past year, we actually engaged with over 11,000 folks across California in climate resilience efforts. A lot of that, unfortunately, was here in the LA area in the wake of the wildfires we experienced. And just noting, I don't need to say this probably for this group, but I'm born and raised here in the LA area and always thinking about our foothills and how I've seen them change, thinking about how do we adapt our communities in the face of what we know will be future fires. And having done this work for some time, I have a vision for the future where we build our homes and our communities using a lot of the practices that we know now that dramatically reduce wildfire risk. And I'll talk about those here in a moment. We plant native plants. Fires come every, hopefully it's 20 to 30 years. Maybe it's every 10 to 20 years. Maybe we evacuate, they burn through, our homes are fine, our landscape regrows in 6 to 12 months, and we move on. And I think we know how to do that today. We're just not really leveraging that knowledge and the systems that are in place. And I think we need to adapt to that reality in the future. We've been doing this work really since the Thomas and Woolsey fire. I just want to note this has really evolved for us as looking at how we build value and raise awareness. We started with home hardening tours. We moved to developing a toolkit I'll share here in a moment for home hardening and landscape defense. And then we started doing training for contractors and landscapers a few years ago through a certificate program on how to do that. We've now had over 2,000 folks go through that program. And when these wildfires hit last year, I myself was evacuated for 5 or 6 days. I live in Pasadena. I'm there right now. Several of my team members lost their homes, and we quickly really tried to pivot on how could we take this content and this network and help be part of the solution. And so a quick snapshot here is a QR code there. I'm going to be throwing QR codes at you like nobody's business, but you can check out our website. You can find the home hardening and defensible space toolkit there. We also have some matchmaking there for folks who are looking for resources, as well as a professional directory. Noting that we have training coming up. We're doing training at least once or twice a month in this space. We have a training here in Spanish for construction workers on how to reduce wildfire risk on March 12th. We also are doing a rebuild certificate training in the Palisades, or for the Palisades in Santa Monica on March 19th. So this stuff is happening on a regular basis. We are trying to get this information out there, build awareness for both contractors and developers and architects, but also residents that they can help create that change. Another QR code here to throw at you just because it's timely and relevant. We are actively recruiting folks now to be part of a new program we are launching as community ambassadors to help create the cultural change we need in our communities for people to really take ownership of their own space and help do that outreach. We'll be hiring folks for $20 an hour for 20 hours per week for 6 months to help do that work. There's a QR code there you can scan to apply for that program. We'll be running this program in East LA County and North Orange County just based on the funding we have, but hope to expand this into a greater part of our communities here in the LA region. So to the rebuilding guide itself, we launched this in April of last year with our partners at Arup. Really, really proud of what we put together here because I think too often we create highly technical volumes that are really difficult for people to understand, and that's not the goal. We want people to be able to hear kind of what we're saying. So there's a QR code there again you can scan to get to version 1.0. We're actually releasing version 2.0 this month in March, as well as a version in Spanish that we're proud to get out into the marketplace. And that's going to include incentives, including the Home LA program that was discussed by Annie earlier from LADWP. What the guide covers, it covers what really kind of causes fire and how to be protected against that. Placement is really important for how do you place your home or your building on your site. What does that look like? Designing your envelope. We want to make sure we're keeping embers out of the building envelope. We're paying attention to air quality, making sure that we're not letting outside air in when there is a smoke event of some kind, and also creating healthier space for folks. Outdoors, been involved in a ton of discussions over the past year. I'm part of the Blue Ribbon Commission for the LA County. It's been helping with the wildfire rebuilding and done a lot of work on the landscape side. And there's a lot we can do there to reduce risk. That's a huge portion of this. Building systems, things like HVAC, backup power, solar, and then we also address some of the new materials that are out there. There's been a lot of conversation around different kinds of design, passive house, hempcrete, things like that. We try to cover some of that stuff in the guide. And then lastly, we talk about community, and I just can't stress enough how important this is about us working together to uplift our communities in the wake of these disasters and to better prep ourselves for the next ones. So in the guide itself, we try to have some kind of key things here, things that are going to help reduce cost. We want to highlight those things are going to be safer, and it's not just about fire. We're obviously concerned here about earthquakes and floods. Unfortunately, we have all these things that are risks here in the greater LA region, and how to be more sustainable as part of that. And so we break down that guide. It is for homeowners, but also designers and contractors. It's important to note, how do homes catch fire? So there's that direct flame contact, there's that radiant heat and the embers. Most of the fires that we've experienced have been caused predominantly by embers really being blown during these events, the Santa Anas and others. But then that fire transitioned into an urban fire, right? And so that's a very different thing for us to think about. And how does that transition from home to home? And again, that managing fire together becomes so important. How do we create those buffer zones, those physical fire breaks? How do we help each other learn? Go help that elderly neighbor we have who maybe needs help with their maintenance in their yard. We need to really create that cultural change in our communities. When we work together actively, we can dramatically reduce that fire risk. Just noting, I think this moved ahead very quickly here. Sorry about that. Okay. So a couple things I just want to touch on. Roofing material. We have some elements here in the guide you can look at. So making sure you're using a non-combustible roof assembly, talking about what some of your options are, how to use less toxic substances, and then having a tight envelope, having a well-insulated roof. Those things reduce your utility costs, right? Those things are going to reduce your expenses long term. Making sure we're going about that the right way. Landscaping. So a lot of conversation around defensible space, what we call zone 0 in that first 5 feet between your home and your landscape. Just noting, I don't think we talk enough about what are we bringing to this. It's not about what we're taking away. How can we create thriving natural landscapes around our homes that reduce fire risk? Especially what do we focus on between that 5 to 30 feet, that zone 1? How do we make sure we're having tree canopy that can protect the home? There's a lot of data that shows that oak leaves can catch embers, drop into the ground, reduce risk of fire. So making sure we're using low flammability options and doing things that are well maintained and well irrigated. It's going to reduce risk. Building systems, so battery, solar, going with all electric appliances. Been doing a lot of workshops myself out in the community and get so many questions about going all electric. And if you do that the right way, that's going to reduce your costs dramatically long term, and it's going to remove other risks such as gas out of the home that could be an issue with an earthquake or another disaster. So it's an important moment for us to make that transition. And then shared energy resilience in our communities. So don't have a lot of time today. Just want to give a high level coverage of that guide. Encourage you to check it out. And note something else that's important that we're working on right now is the shared purchasing power. So we're seeing that right now in a lot of these communities that we're building. We have groups of contractors that are working together. If we can share plans, there's a lot of template plans that are out there. We're actually putting together some template landscape designs with some partners of ours right now. How do you work with local native nurseries to make sure they have plant availability ahead of time? We have a group purchasing platform that we white labeled and launched last year. There's a QR code there again you can scan where you can essentially the tool will match make similar purchases of similar items in similar regions so that we can take advantage of group purchasing. Manufacturers can bid on those things to reduce cost. And we have a learning center where you can find all that information for our classes coming up. There's a QR code there. Again, you can scan to check that out. We also have a professionals directory. We have over 60 folks listed in that directory now who've been certified through our classes. If you're looking for folks to help harden your home or help with rebuilding, you can find those folks in our professionals directory. With that, I encourage you to just stay connected. And again, it's all about, I think, community and us being human and supporting each other through this process. And I do believe in a more adaptable, resilient vision for our future that I think is achievable. So thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Ben. A lot of really great information. So we'll bring in Jesse Barra now from Neighborhood Partnership Housing Services.
Hello, everybody. Jesse Barra, Chief Business Officer with Neighborhood Partnership Housing Services, also known as NPHS. I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about who we are and how we got into this mitigation and recovery, looking at ourselves as a first responder. Go ahead and next slide, please. Or do I have control? No, I don't. Okay. So NPHS, we are a nonprofit organization. We have four main areas of impact. We're a HUD counseling agency. We are CDFI, and we are a community developer. And now we've just recently added policy and research to the mix. And through our new construction, we mostly have focused on scattered site infill development, single family homes. And with each home we build, we use the motto to guide our work, and it is building homes that rise to meet the wellness of families and individuals. And so we've been for years, working with different ways that we can add not only sustainability but resilience. And we became the first wildfire prepared designated home through the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety in 2023. And that sort of led us to think about how we can potentially help others with existing homes and retrofitting their homes and becoming more resilient against wildfires. And so if you can go to the next slide, please. So for us, we serve the Inland Empire, so East Los Angeles County, San Bernardino, Riverside County. And as you know, 75% of our buyers in the region are coming from LA County, Orange County, or San Diego, and they're looking for more affordability. And as the immediate areas around these communities have become less affordable, folks continue to move further out. And unfortunately, that's put them in danger, and they're in very high risk areas. And we began to see through our HUD counseling a lot of folks approaching us with issues with insurance. And that really got us thinking about, again, how do we help folks who have purchased a property because it was affordable, now it's no longer affordable. And it is because their insurance provider is letting them know that there's potential risk there that they need mitigated. Otherwise, they're either going to increase their premium substantially, or they're going to lose their insurance altogether. So we wanted to figure out how we can help. And that's, I think, our job as a CDFI, is identifying failures in the market and coming up with solutions. So next slide, we'll go over some of these solutions that we've been working on. The first one is partnerships. We looked at what are existing programs that are currently available to homeowners to help with retrofitting their home and doing home hardening against wildfires. We discovered that the California Wildfire Mitigation Program Authority, which is a state level agency, their joint powers authority under CAL FIRE and Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, and Cal OES, which is the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. And they work with FEMA on providing grants to at-risk homeowners. And there is a match component for the homeowners. And we thought, well, how do we work together on helping more folks? They've been working typically 4 counties at a time. And we thought we need to work together to expand this work, create additional funding sources for this. It's currently being funded through the general fund and really bond funding that came in, over $1 billion, and a large, about 135 million of that was earmarked for CWMPA. And really it's that number is going to go on for some time, but it's really about 20 million, with the rest of it coming from the match from FEMA. And the other idea was, how do we then partner with other CDFIs in California to, again, who are embedded in communities that may be struggling with these same issues, and also expanding the type of lending that we're doing, not just single family homes. As you know, insurance providers are looking at all types of construction types, meaning commercial property, multifamily, forest management, really all goes into the risk modeling. So we wanted to work with a lot of CDFIs, work together to more quickly get the funding out, but also leverage their tools to bring in more private capital to continue funding this type of program. And obviously the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, who are scientists who are commissioned by insurance providers to test materials against various types of natural disasters. And so they're known for their fortified product, which is a high wind resilient roofing material. And again, they came in 2023 to California as their first stop to start this wildfire designation, wildfire prepared designation, which has two components to it. There's a base and there's a plus. And then ideally, we wanted to encourage insurance carriers to invest in de-risking their own portfolios rather than dropping folks from their insurance or increasing rates. How do we create a win-win situation where insurance providers are incentivized to invest into these types of programs and thus continue to serve the populations that they've been serving? And so we created a menu of products. We have Resilience Now, Resilience, and Resilience Rebuild, and I'll go over each one of those in a little more detail in the next slides. But we presented a CDFI tax credit model to incentivize those investments for insurance providers. And we are currently working with a couple who are interested in making investments and piloting some programs where we would be conducting some joint outreach efforts, and they would be providing substantial premium discounts to those homeowners that complete work. Next slide, please. So these are the three main loans. The Resilience Now was really an emergency fund for folks who were coming to us through our counseling work saying, we received this notice from our insurance provider. We're going to be dropped from our insurance. Can you help us? So we noticed that most of the work was fairly simple, debris or overgrown vegetation, maybe tree removal. So we came up with this emergency up to $5,000 fund for them to be able to access to take care of those items so that they don't lose their insurance. The second one was the Resilience Retrofit Program, which is a more substantial approach, right? It is really trying to get folks to the IBHS Wildfire Prepared designation. And we knew that at the time when we created this, there was no recognition of this yet in terms of the insurance providers providing a specific discount. They're really across the board at the moment still. And so we wanted to incentivize folks as part of their existing maybe home rehab work that they needed to complete, add this as a part of that, and in turn we would reduce their interest rate and increase their total loan amount. And then LA fires hit, and all of a sudden we started getting calls left and right from folks because they were finding our resilience work on the retrofit side and were wondering if we had a rebuild product. And at the time we really didn't know how we would really respond. Through our counseling, we've been working with Restore LA and a coalition of other nonprofit and service providers to provide counseling services, but we didn't really have any, again, financial products. We also happened to be a manufactured housing dealer, and we're working with Green Line Housing and others to provide ADUs, accessory dwelling units, that are factory built. We can build them in as little as 10 days. And we felt this could be a really phenomenal way for folks to rebuild quickly and get back on their site. And we know that the county is allowing for that to happen without even having the permits and entitlements ready for their primary home. So we still are providing that service, but also wanted to create, how do we create and utilize some funding and financing for folks who want to rebuild, but don't want to just rebuild to what they had or 7A, but want to rebuild to the IBHS standard, which is a higher standard. And so this is how the Resilience Rebuild product was born. And if you go to the next slide, we'll go through each one briefly. So I kind of went through this scenario, like common scenarios that we were seeing. It was, homeowners didn't have enough funds for repair. Insurance providers came. They either do a HELOC or cash out refinance. It just wasn't working for them in this interest rate environment. So that's how the next product you go ahead and next slide is the now. Again, it's up to 5. We will make exceptions to go up to 10,000. The maximum loan to value and really CLTV, because these would be a second lien position for the most part, is up to 80%. But for certain low income households, we can go as high as even 90%. It's a 5-year term, so shorter term, and it's right now targeted interest rates 5.99%, but the lowest we can go is about 1.5% under the Freddie Mac 30-year is what we try to aim for, with the maximum really being 5.99%. We charge very little. It's a small fee that we're charging on the borrower paid as part of that, and there is some education requirements. We want folks to understand resiliency and community hardening classes that we provide, and we provide technical assistance as well to help folks achieve that if they're interested. Next slide, please. Second scenario that I discussed was, we have low to moderate income households that were approaching us who need a new roof. And we felt like, okay, well, how do we encourage you to do more than that? And their options, again, very limited in the type of financing. So we wanted to go ahead and offer the Resilience Retrofit program. Again, them being able to include this as part of the scope. Next slide, please. This is up to you. Again, second lien position is allowable. Can work on residential or, 1 to 40 units, not necessarily multifamily, but we would consider if anybody does have a multifamily, we'll take a look at what we can do there. Maximum loan amount is 50,000, same thing. Max CLTV is 80%. This one's a little bit longer term, 15 years, and the first 12 months are interest only. And you have a minimum credit score requirement of 620, and 6.99% is the initial rate. If you do not achieve either the base or the plus through IBHS designation, then you'd get the higher rate. We needed to have some sort of a carrot and stick approach to this to ensure that folks are meeting their goals. And so a 5.99% is offered when they achieve the base designation, and a 5.49% once they've reached the plus. They do need to recertify every 3 years and provide evidence of that. Otherwise, their interest rate will go back up. And same fees that we charge on the others. Next slide, please. Lastly is, again, the rebuild product. We know folks are struggling now, and we wanted to help any way we could. So we kind of took what we were doing with the resilience product and our ADU Go program, which is financing for factory built ADUs, and we sort of meshed them together and we came up with this program. If you want to go to the next slide, we're really just trying to finance that delta between what it costs to rebuild versus rebuilding to a higher standard, IBHS specifically. This one does cap out, however, at 5% only, and that is for base or plus. And you get a 5.99% if you don't achieve either one of those. It's up to $100,000. Again, this could be in second lien position, and we'll even consider potentially third lien position depending on the scenario and the cumulative loan to value on this. And we're just in the process. We're still fundraising for this program, so we need additional capital. We're seeking more investments for this to help more folks, and we plan to do a big launch hopefully in the next couple of months. And working with our coalition partners and others who want to participate as well. We're willing to share our findings. Part of this is, we're piloting programs. We're trying to figure it out, and there may be tweaks as we go along. And then leveraging any other resources that we may have, either through, again, CWMPA, if they're willing to offer grants for rebuild as well. Right now, they're not offering that, but we're encouraging maybe, piloting something of that nature. We'll see where that goes. Next slide. I think we're pretty much to the end. This is just kind of recapping where we're at with CWMPA that I mentioned, we're leveraging their grant and utilizing our resilience program. We're going to really jointly develop this framework to figure out how to mitigate future disasters and the amount of damage that is caused by them. We want to continue engaging in discussions with not only private capital, providers, banks looking for CRA credit, insurance providers to again continuing this type of work and doing it at a larger scale across California. And then next slide. Again, I talked a little bit about this in the beginning of where currently had a couple conversations with the California Treasury, brought in CCCI, which is a coalition of California CDFIs, and the idea is again to create a menu of products that maybe cover different housing types outside of just residential, and come up with a strategy where we can more quickly deploy capital and use our leveraging tools as CDFIs to bring in more of that private capital to keep this sustainable long term, and hopefully grow that fund of 135 million to over $1 billion without having to rely on additional bonds or public support. We really would love to continue working with philanthropic and public agencies who are interested in providing resources and are allocating certain funding that they may have towards this type of work, and we're open to partnerships throughout. So and we hope that this is a catalytic change again across the nation. I mean, the idea is we're not the only ones having insurance issues. Ours is very specific to wildfires, and there's other regions that have other issues. But if we can come up and demonstrate a model of this public-private partnership, and again, how insurance providers can be encouraged to de-risk their own portfolios and actually invest in de-risking their own portfolios, I think this could be a huge, again, change for the positive across the nation, and the way that we view the modeling, risk modeling, and investments. And I'll stop there. I think I got one last slide, but I think we're out of time here. It's okay. I'll stop there.
We're good on time, Jesse, if you want to cover that last
Sure,
slide.
yeah, if you want to go. So I kind of just talked through it. But I'll expand a little more. We feel that insurance providers have the data, and we would like to work with them on gathering that data and back into again solutions that work for everybody. We're not asking them to just give away money. I mean, the idea is investing where there's an actual rate of return that comes back to them, but on top of that, again, they're able to assist their current portfolios, and offer deep discounts. We also love to see a standardization of discounts where we're aiming for IBHS standard, but it may not be IBHS, right? But some sort of standardization to where it makes it easier for folks to understand, like for us to deploy this, people got to take on debt to make this happen. And especially for low-income families, they're not going to jump at the opportunity to take on debt, right? For some future potential disaster. However, if they know that there's going to be a bottom line improvement to their monthly expenses, which there would be, I think that is the sweet spot. And so if we can again get a standardized formula for how we're offering discounts on the insurance side, that's going to be very beneficial for the consumer to understand, okay, yes, this is beneficial for me. I want to take this work, and the adoption, I think, would be much faster than if we just continue the way we've been doing it and sort of more of a piecemealed approach to this work. And now I'll stop.
Thanks, Jesse. A lot of great information there.
Thanks.
Awesome. So to close us out, at least on the presentation front, I just wanted to quickly highlight a set of resources that our Southern California team have put together that we're calling our Stronger Together Disaster Resource Guides. These guides, we sort of designed and curated them to include helpful resources on topics such as disaster recovery planning, hazard mitigation, trauma-informed disaster response, HUD resources help with sort of navigating these HUD resources. And then you can see here on the slide a resource guide on mitigating and preparing for wildfires. So each of these resources provides information that's sort of broken down and made accessible and digestible to help individuals, property owners, public officials, and philanthropy really kind of navigate disasters as they happen in their communities and help prepare for them. Um, we sort of took a comprehensive approach here and really wanting to ensure that stakeholders at each level can really quickly find relevant guidance and take coordinated action in the aftermath of a disaster and help, as I said, in preparation for future disasters. So you can learn more on our website. We have it linked there. We'll make sure that folks get these slides, but also just wanted to tag these as a resource for folks. Next slide. Okay. Q&A. We have a few minutes for Q&A. Don't believe we have any questions in the chat. Quieter group today, but I did want to just pose one quick question to our panelists. If you will indulge me, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to just chime in quickly on a question, just sort of generally, what is sort of each of our panelists sort of are operating in their own lane in very unique spaces in the sort of disaster recovery space, technically or from a policy lens. And so I wanted to ask each of our panelists, sort of, what is one lesson learned that you can share with our audience? A lesson that you've learned sort of doing this type of work around disaster mitigation, disaster preparedness. And I'll maybe put let's see, I'll put Ben Stapleton on the spot.
Thank you for putting me on the spot, Michael. First, I think a couple lessons that I've learned, and it's a long list, I guess, if we start thinking about it. But I think I wouldn't underestimate people and their willingness to do the right thing if they have access to the resources, they have the awareness and education, and have the support. What I'll say about that is, I think in the wake of these fires, I thought, hey, if we can get 20% of these homes to rebuild more sustainably, right, and all electric and more resilient, like that'd be a huge win. It'd be probably the most scale we've ever seen for that kind of rebuilding. And then I talked to people who went through the Marshall Fire in Colorado, and they saw 80% of their homes rebuild all electric, more resilient, more sustainable, because they got people the education, information, access to a lot of these kind of great programs. And so I think we needed to help arrange ourselves to supply that kind of support for our communities. The other thing I would say, I spoke at a workshop in October. I think it was over 600 senior citizens, 90% people of color had lost their homes in Altadena. And what blew me away is they weren't all there really for themselves. They were there for that generational wealth for their families, and they wanted to do this the right way and do the right thing. And that really inspired me, and I think that should inspire all of us to try to stay the course here and for what it's worth.
Absolutely. Love that. Thanks, Ben. Let's see. I'll ask Krista Egger to share a lesson learned.
Thanks, Michael. Such a good question. Last year was the 20th anniversary of Katrina. So I was, doing a lot of work in the Gulf Coast last year, and it's remarkable how time has flown by, and how much more progress has been made at the same time as not as much, in other realms. So just when it comes down to it, the more that you can take the long view, I think the better off we'll be. Long view in terms of what would you like your community to look like for the next generation, and how can you start impacting that now? Long view in terms of what policy changes might seem impossible now, but we'd really like to see, and so let's begin the advocacy process, and so on and so forth. So take the long view whenever possible.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Krista. Let's ask Chris to share a lesson learned.
Yeah, so kind of coming from I mentioned that we did the mortgage relief program for COVID, and now we're doing a mortgage relief program for LA fires and other disasters. And I think that one of the lessons that we've learned through those years is, we can send out. We can talk over and over again about all the guidelines, all the stuff I shared with all of you guys. But when we're doing outreach, we really like just kind of focus on just like contact the program and we'll walk you through it. And we've really like found that people appreciate that. And so, of course, everyone has different resources, but the fact that we have this contact center and we have people that just interact directly with homeowners that have questions. I don't want you to have to memorize my term sheet. I'd rather just get you to give me a call. So
Yeah,
that's something we push more and more as we've been going on through.
absolutely. Thank you, Chris. And Jesse, I know you just spoke, but any lessons learned from doing this work?
Yeah, well, just two actually, if I could.
Yeah,
One is how easy it is to really reduce your chances of having a catastrophe at your home just by the zone zero that Ben was talking about. That is reduces your chances of your building burning down by 50%. And embers obviously a big part of that. So covering your vents with no, 1/8 mesh and your gutters as well does so much, right? And it's so easy. It doesn't cost a lot of money to do that. Removing anything that's combustible within 5 feet around your home is, I think most people can do that and achieve that fairly simply. But the other is people's resilience themselves, right? And I mean, they have not lost. I don't live in the area. I live in the city of Downey, and so I mean, we can feel it and smell it, but it didn't affect us in that way. But I know a lot of folks who live in Altadena who have gone through losing everything. And it's incredible how resilient, how they just have been able to continue pushing forward. And I don't know that I don't know. I try to put myself in their shoes, and I don't know that I would be able to be strong. Maybe I would, but it's really incredible how many people have just been able to continue persevering, and it's just a testament to our communities and why we should be helping one another as much as we can.
great. Thank you, Jesse. I'll actually keep you on the screen, Jesse, because I think we have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
Um, question, and any of the panelists, feel free to jump in, but question in the chat around any research pilot projects initiated for sharing risks with insurance companies while encouraging them to invest in prospective developments.
No, the closest we've gotten something similar to that is working with foundations who are incentivizing their investments by providing loan guarantees and or guarantees on attrition. For example, if somebody like the churn, if were to get a loan as part of it, they do the work, but then they end up switching providers. They're willing to come to the table. So that's been very helpful, but no, we haven't explored anything like that. It's a great question, though.
Great. What about uh, any products to help homeowners rebuild for people without a mortgage loan and had no homeowners insurance?
Our program works for in first or second position, and I do know of some of our other organizations. One of our affiliate organizations as part of our national network, NHSLA County, I believe, has some programs. They have both a grant program and a first or second mortgage product that is pretty good. It's also, I think, between 3 and 5%. It's up to 250,000. I don't know how much it'll get you. You might still need to leverage some other funding, but I think that that's a huge help. It can be combined with our financing as well. So I'd look into that if you're in the area.
Thanks, Jesse. And I think this is kind of a general question to the panel. Anybody feel free to chime in, but is there any work happening that folks are aware of around coordinated disaster evacuation plans?
I'll just add the little comment that I know that in the communities we've been in, there's a lot more conversation around that now, especially in the Palisades. Resilient Palisades and others have been looking at how to draft new plans for the future. But yeah, that's not an official answer in any way. I just know that I think communities are a lot more aware of that now, and frankly, we need to be talking about this a lot more for our communities that haven't burned yet, right? That's
Right.
that's what keeps me up at night now.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay.
And if I
And
can
certainly,
jump in, I
yeah,
see Michael's on the DTI basis. Yeah, we understand. We offer exceptions, especially for low income households. So, and then again, I know NHSLA County has a specifically for seniors. It's up to 250,000 in grant. So I look into that as well. You working with seniors, or you are one.
great. Thanks, Jesse. Awesome. Well, I want to just, we can go to the next slide, Brian. All right. Just want to thank all of our panelists for dedicating their time and their expertise. Really extremely grateful for them. I hope folks found a lot of value in what was shared today. And just to close out here, wanted to remind folks that we have an upcoming webinar and as part of our LA County wildfire recovery series, How to Rebuild Financing 101, and that'll be Wednesday, April 1st at 12 p.m. So please register for that. You can find information for that on our website or our newsletter. And then if any questions for folks come up after the webinar, always feel free to reach out to me or to Sydney. Our contact information will be there, and we'll make sure that folks get the slides and the session recording as well so that you can share it with your colleagues or any of your staff. So thank you so much, and we'll look forward to connecting with you soon.